Hello and welcome to the 1895 podcast with me, Tom.
And me, Rob.
And Rob, I think we can skip the foreplay here on this one because this is another episode that we've been teasing now for a couple of weeks, and we're going to have our third and final revisit to our APAC Industrial Gases Conference in Bangkok, and once again relive another of those panel discussions. And this one came from day 2 of the event, and it was APAC's role in global industrial gas supply chains. Another fantastic panel.
Another arousing APAC conversation, yeah. My panel for that was Professor Richard Boocock Advisory, Vineet Koshal of INOXCVA, and Yuki of Energy Iceberg. And this one differed because we tried to expand it to move the conversation to the wider APAC region, not just 2 economies in China and India. Inevitably, we kept becoming dragged back into those 2 forces in the industry these days. But yeah, some great conversation here. Again, fairly free-flowing, although I think we might have put a couple of the speakers on the spot at times when given questions. So yeah, look out for those, or listen out for those, I should say.
Yes, and well, with that, let's head back to Bangkok.
We focused on the China and India markets yesterday, and we are today going to build on that, looking at some more of those regional markets topics, and let's get into some of the challenges as well. But first, we'll begin with our introductions. The first of our speakers is Professor Richard Boocock, Director and Principal Consultant at Boocock Advisory, to my right here. Richard enjoyed a 39-year career at Air Products and Chemicals and has experience in almost every aspect of the industrial gases and hydrogen value chain in all modes of supply across a wide range of geographies. Today, he works as a freelance consultant, advising clients on a variety of topics, including hydrogen and the hydrogen economy, the energy transition, digital transformation, sustainability, and technology innovation and commercialization. Next, to my left, we have Vineet Koshal, Vice President of INOXCVA. With over 2 decades of experience, Vineet has been instrumental in expanding INOXCVA's footprint across diverse global export markets, driving large-scale cryogenic and clean energy infrastructure projects. He blends technical excellence with strategic insight and brings extensive expertise in EPC engineering, project management, and international business development. And also further to my left, we have Yuki. We welcome Yuki back. Yuki is founder of Energy Iceberg, a China-focused clean energy intelligence firm. With over 15 years in China's clean tech ecosystem and the past 5 dedicated to hydrogen market data and on-the-ground analysis, Yuki helps international investors, companies, and research teams to strengthen their China strategy and market understanding. She's also contributed to several international energy trade journals and continues to provide expert insights for multinational clients and organizations seeking clarity on China's fast-evolving clean energy landscape. As with yesterday, I'd like to open with a sort of soft introduction or soft landing question. I did that for you yesterday, Richard, so I'm going to turn to Yuki and Vineet first. Yuki, let's come to you first. How have you found the event from a non-industrial gas background, and what have been your key thoughts?
Well, I found this event for me is very refreshing, is interesting, because I come from, so my research focus and interests have purely come from a very upstream perspective. So it's from renewable power and then green hydrogen. So it is interesting to hear the perspective from the downstream. If anything, is confirming what we have already been observing, specifically on hydrogen. Then the downstream offtake is the key bottleneck of this very, very nascent industry. So it's also interesting to have here that some of the new development or some of the idea of the where could hydrogen potentially be used in terms of in the industrial gas processing sector. A lot of the area actually it triggered me to think about perhaps green hydrogen could also play a role in this industry, like for example, solar waffle processing and semiconductor material processing. Actually, those type of project already, there is a few of first of this kind type of project in China are utilizing PEM electrolyzer and then producing high purity hydrogen and then processing. So, but those in China are still very like demonstration phase. So it's interesting to hear that and learn from the downstream experts, like where is the area that could need hydrogen, and therefore to see whether from a China perspective that it could be a growth sector for green hydrogen. Yeah.
Fantastic, and I'm glad that we've been able to further some of your understanding because you gave us so many insights yesterday, and we'll come back to some of those shortly. Vineet, congratulations on an amazing awards evening for the Inox Group, actually.
Thank you.
It's great to see that hard work and innovation recognized, but how have you found the rest of the event and the presentations so far?
First of all, hello. So good morning, everybody. First of all, thanks GasWorld and INOXCVA management team that I have got this opportunity to be among the experienced panelists. Yes, so Bangkok is always exciting, and yes, it is a pleasure to be here among the seasoned, experienced players, customers, fellow suppliers. And yes, it has been great. I mean, we have been associated with GasWorld since it started doing these conferences. So yeah, excited, exciting as always. Congratulations to the GasWorld team.
Thank you very much. Congratulations again. Richard, I'm going to turn to you now to the first hard question of the panel. I'm sure it'll be fine for you. We canvassed your views yesterday on these markets and some of the opportunities, of course. I'm hoping today, as I said, that we can get into some of the challenges, actually. So let me start by asking you, where do you see the biggest challenges for this region? Amidst all the opportunities, where's the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, and thanks everyone for coming along to listen to us. I see the biggest challenges being geopolitical challenges. I think we had an excellent set of presentations to start off today, just as we had an excellent set of presentations to start off yesterday. And I think one of the things that came through in some of those presentations was that we live in a world where we're navigating geopolitics. And one of the challenges for many of the countries in this region and for the companies that are looking to serve, or support business opportunities is to actually understand where does geopolitics present me with increased risk. And I was saying to a couple of people during the coffee break, one of the things I share with my students, because I work part-time at a university, is helping them to prepare for the fact that when you graduate from university and you do your first job, you tend to do your job assuming that everything's going to go right. But one of the things you find as you get a little bit older and more senior in organization, you spend more and more of your time thinking about what's going to go wrong and how do I defend to the downside. So to pick up on one of Andy's points, something I subscribe to very strongly, is geopolitics in the CHIPS Act in the US and the European Union saying that they want to bring back semiconductor manufacturing, whatever that might mean. Simply, in some regards, simply means that the industry is going to have more capacity than it needs, right? If the chip manufacturers needed capacity in Europe, they would have put it there already. They wouldn't need to be told. So you create a situation where an industry is creating overcapacity to satisfy a geopolitical whim, and you then, as a business working in that industry, now have to think about, one, what happens when the geopolitical whim changes, because it does, and two, what happens even if the geopolitical situation still remains, what happens when the next downturn comes? Because believe me, there will be a downturn. And Andy's slide showed that very nicely, brought back a lot of bad memories from the year 2000 for me and beyond. And that's what we have to be prepared for. And I think this region has huge opportunities in terms of its natural competitive advantage, the population size, the market size, the cost structure, the access to resources and so on. But they can, this region can't be isolated from the rest of the world. And so that's one of the, for me, that is the biggest challenge for all of us, wherever we are in the world. We've got to navigate through all those geopolitical hurdles and barriers that are being put in place by those lovely politicians, only some of whom we vote for. So.
Fantastic, thank you, great. I mean, you went into some topics there that I had in my original notes and thought I'd stay away from, but we've gone there. Thank you, Richard. I wonder if the AV team could pull up our current poll, because that's actually about the challenges facing the region. Now, I don't think we've had too many votes on this as yet, but maybe we'll see that change. Okay, this is interesting. So earlier this morning, it was skilled workforce and essentially the labour challenge that was occupying the biggest share of the vote here. We can see this has changed a bit. We've got a fairly even spread there, regulatory hurdles and permitting, capital investment. I didn't expect to see that. What are your thoughts on those kind of that split of opinion there, Richard?
I think this just indicates that everyone that responds to a survey of this type probably has their problem of the day, or their problem of the week, or their problem of the month. Certainly, regulatory hurdles and permitting is, especially when you are starting to work across national boundaries, it's just something you have to figure out how you're going to deal with. You know, as someone who likes to tell stories from the past, I remember in the 1980s into the 1990s, we were looking at helping a company in Saudi Arabia make krypton and xenon, right? So lots of people get excited about krypton and xenon, especially in the semiconductor industry. It was only when we got to the stage of having a dewar full of this concentrated mixture that our customer actually realized that krypton and xenon is classed as a radioactive material in Saudi Arabia, because it actually accumulates all the background radiation that exists around us. And so it took them 12 months to get the permits in place to actually move that dewar out of the site and down the road to the port for processing. So just a simple example. I'm sure anyone that's working in any country in this region, and in particular working with the European and the United States, is very familiar with regulatory hurdles and permitting in terms of how do you move stuff efficiently and smoothly through transnational boundaries.
Okay, and great to see this vote shifting. Please do continue to have your votes. It's driving the discussion. I'll open this up to the rest of the panel. Yuki, is there anything, I mean, how does that vote resonate with you? Regulatory and permitting with hydrogen? Is that a problem?
Yes, of course, because at this point, policy and regulation is the key to drive demand. Because if you look at where demand is going to go, it needs to have some sort of like policy or target, put it on pawn of either region or either downstream sector, so that to propel them to needing to use hydrogen. And that, so yesterday I have briefly mentioned, for example, iron and steel industry is now including in China's mandatory carbon trading market. So that would shift the dynamic for the iron and steel industry using hydrogen in China, whereas the petrochemical and chemical industry, it is not included yet. And the government is using more like the mandate or suggestion or supporting them from the supply side, but the effect would be less compared to a carbon target. So I think that reflects on the Southeast Asia market, that given that there is not really hard carbon mandate or a target upon industry, therefore the demand will be less. And I definitely agree with Richard on the geopolitical risk as well. One of the things I observe is that, well, for green hydrogen industry, from day one, year one, and 2021, that the concern from Europe for China's manufacturing has been playing a very important factor in the whole how to shake up this industry, which supply chain to use, etc. So it is a big factor. And as China, if China emerge, really succeed in becoming the major market for green hydrogen. And on the flip side is that how important it is for hydrogen, it will make this industry even more risky or subjective to geopolitical risk. If there is less of a China element, probably there will be less geopolitical conflict. But if there is a heavier China element, there will probably a heavier geopolitical risk in my view.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that sense of exposure. We'll come back to you on those challenges as well. But Vineet, just before we lose the poll, does any of this resonate with you? I mean, Labour, for example?
I would like to add here that I think Anthony mentioned yesterday that the greatest of the challenges is HR. And it also, I mean, you can correlate it very clearly with the fact that we are tagged the global manufacturing hub. And it's not only in industrial manufacturing, but it also is in producing babies. So we have 60% of the population in this region, and we are contributing 27% of the global industrial gas production. So obviously there is a gap, and there needs to be, a lot of training around that. So this challenge also has to be taken care of. This gap has to be fulfilled.
Okay, thank you. So let's move away from the poll now. But before we do get to the next question, just a reminder, please do get your questions in for our panel. If there's something you didn't ask Richard yesterday, or perhaps Yuki, this is another opportunity to throw those in, and we'll try and come back to those in the next sort of 10 minutes, so please do try and get those in. Yuki, I said I wanted to come back to you with some of those challenges. I guess just to recap some of your talk yesterday, because you did challenge some of our perceptions. You gave us some great insights, you shared some of those challenges, but is offtake the biggest challenge then, or is it more complex and nuanced as you just suggested?
More near term, of course, who is going to pay for that is the key challenge. So it seemingly is a question about off-taking, but the root factor is the cost, right? So if it's super cheap, and if the green hydrogen or hydrogen is highly available in a very, very good economic scale, then it will naturally come. So they are connected, the cost, the offtake, and then how to reduce costs. Then it's about technology and about market setup, is about policy. How do we have policy that could support initially the demand side, and then to make it to, there is a think tank or organization in Germany called the Hydrogen Global Foundation. So they have been talking about this concept called the tipping point. It's basically saying green hydrogen industry, you have to move to a certain direction with the support of policy or subsidy or whatever to reach to a point that you have the economic of scale, then everything will just fall into places. So in the end, it's about how to move to that tipping point, and surrounding that tipping point, we need technology, we need good policy, design. So the surface of the question is offtake, but behind that is cost. Yeah.
So much more behind it. And if I just stay with you for a moment, are you able to comment on the Indian hydrogen market? I mean, how strong do you think that opportunity is, or not? Putting you on the spot there.
The key is that in the end, the first factor that Indian market meet is its availability of renewable and the cost of renewable, because it can achieve to the cost for making, theoretically, again, making renewable cheap and making greenfield cheap. So it meets that criteria. So for me, always, if I have to judge a market whether green hydrogen can be successful or not, do they have the a big scale of renewable. They have so much renewable, they don't know how to deal with it, like in China, then you already meet the first condition. So India definitely meet that criteria and is working on that criteria. And yesterday I also learned, actually, I learned quite a lot about the Indian market yesterday. Is about investment is getting in, and there is a lot more support from the European buyer, from European companies. So the technology is also getting in. So that also provide this potential trajectory to moving into that. I think even the Chinese market, from the Chinese hydrogen developer, they are actually very, very curiously looking and comparing and for the cost in China and the cost in India and thinking, because this year there's a tender concluded for the India's green ammonia project, and it would really shock not only the European market, but also the Chinese market to say, how is it even possible? So based on our calculation that the project in China are sort of similar on par, but then in actual project operation, the cost should be higher than that. So therefore, the question in the Chinese market is really like, okay, right now they have this tender price, but are they actually, when they build a project, when they started to producing, is it really the cost they can deliver? So delivery is a question in that sense. I haven't been to India, so I only hear a few things about that. So I'm not sure that if I'm the person who could judge about a target and delivery in that market. But I think that's a question that I heard a lot from the Chinese industry when they evaluating the development in India. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. You've got us off to a good start there. Thank you. I was just going to open this to you, Richard, because you mentioned your expertise in India yesterday.
Yeah, so I just wanted to build on Yuki's comments and again on Yuki's presentation from yesterday. And one of the things I do with some of my students, because I have to provide projects to students. It's one of my jobs as a university professor. And so I get them to model green hydrogen, green ammonia value chains from a thermodynamics and economics standpoint. And people might have switched off in the audience because I mentioned thermodynamics, and they may have nightmares from their university careers. But the reality for green hydrogen, wherever you are in the world, is that it has to follow the laws of physics and the laws of thermodynamics. And the minimum amount of electricity required to produce a kilogram of hydrogen from a molecule from water is 39 kilowatt hours. That's the laws of physics. And so one of the things I would encourage everyone that's presented with an opportunity to be involved in a green hydrogen project, and especially if someone is asking you to invest to support that project, is start to develop, if you haven't got them already, start to develop your capabilities in modeling that green hydrogen value chain. Because if we very simply take that 39 kilowatt hours a kilogram for a perfect electrolyzer that Yuki mentioned yesterday, perfect efficiency electrolyzer. If you have 1 US cent per kilowatt hour electricity, that means you have 39 cents of energy that goes into every kilogram of hydrogen. As Yuki highlighted, about 70% of the cost of your hydrogen is energy. So if you add a little bit more to that 39 cents, you end up with, let's call it, 60 to 70 cents a kilogram. 70 cents a kilogram for hydrogen, if you convert it into dollars per million BTUs, because you need about 8.5 kilograms of hydrogen to make a million BTUs. So 8.5 times 60 or 70 is what? It's about $6, $7 a million, thereabouts. US natural gas at the moment is $4 a million. Western European natural gas is $10 a million. So these are the models that you have to build. And that is when you get to, for example, projects to bring green ammonia to Western Europe, to crack it into hydrogen, to make green hydrogen to decarbonize industry. The You know, an optimistic view of that is you're going to be landing hydrogen at $5 to $6 per kilogram. So that's about $40 a million BTUs. And then European industry now needs to figure out, can it be competitive with an energy source of $40 a million BTUs, or how big does the subsidy have to be to make it worthwhile? Now, our governments and countries around the world have lots of subsidies in place. There's lots of things that are grown in the United States, for example, that shouldn't be grown in the United States, but they are grown in the United States because the farmers get very big subsidies. So I'm not saying that strange things can happen. All I'm saying to the people in the company, or for the companies in this room, is this is a capability that I would encourage people to develop. It's very simple modeling of these value chains and asking questions around, as part of your due diligence of your customers, does this make sense? Can it make sense? What policy environment is required to make it make sense? And therefore, how do I enter into this business relationship and how do I manage my risk?
Fantastic, fantastic bit of advice. Anything further from you, Yuki, before we move on? Anything further in response to what Richard's just said?
I agree.
Fantastic. Okay, what a panel. Please do continue to send your questions in. I've seen one come in, but don't let me drive all the discussion. You have your opportunity here as well, so please send those in. Vineet, I'd like to come to you for a moment. If we move on to a sense of collaboration and strategic partnerships. I mean, Rich has just given us some great advice on the modeling and the kind of fundamentals, but if we're talking about some of the wider challenges that we've discussed, Inox has a great history of partnerships, as we celebrated last night as well. How can partnerships and collaboration overcome some of the challenges, in your experience?
I mean, basically, if you see any such collaboration would definitely derive the growth aspirations or to improve the efficiencies or to penetrate the market. So there are different strategies which can help, and it can be either a joint venture which can help us to share the resources and expertise, or it can help us leverage established market players' strengths. There can be technical collabs happening to make sure that innovative and more advanced solutions are available. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, it can be a supply chain partnership where you have long-term agreements in place with the vendors. You use the pooled assets. That helps a lot. There can be an optimized distribution which leads to timely delivery to customers. There can be sector-specific alliances, like there is to meet the precise needs of each sector, maybe setting up of purity standards for medical, or like specialty gas for electronic industry. So the list goes on. I mean, there can be collabs on production facilities, storage facilities, distribution network. There can be government collabs, specifically partnering with government agencies to make sure that the national, we are aligned with the national policies or missions. In short, these are very essential to drive growth aspirations, technical advancements, and market penetration.
Okay, thank you very much, Vineet. And I think looking at maybe one of our questions here, that might give us a good segue into our audience Q&A for a moment. If we can pull up those questions on screen, please. Here we go. Yes, it does. Look, so, Yuki, is safety something that needs to be taken into consideration when we look at electrolyzer manufacturing in China?
When looking at manufacturing, okay, electrolyzer manufacturing, well, safety is definitely a very key factor in terms of hydrogen operation and hydrogen plants and transportation, and especially also in fuel cell vehicle refilling. I think that is the key area that when we talk about safety for the hydrogen sector, that's the key concern area. In terms of electrolyzer manufacturing, this is not really a key area that is under discussion about the Chinese electrolyzer manufacturing. I think the key, how to say, debate or exploration or discussion is to see that whether China's electrolyzer can really, whether it can actually deliver from in the real project that what they have promises in the paper. They say that they can produce, they utilize 3.8 kilowatt hour per ton, per kg of hydrogen, whether it's actually the case in a real project. So the efficiency and the life cycle and how long they need to be maintained, how often they need to be maintained, and how long they can actually be used, and what is their coordination with the renewable power, intermittency, etc. Those are the key technology area that being discussed at this point. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, are there any known safety or standards issues?
Of course, there is a safety issue. There are accidents being reported. Yeah, I heard a few, but this is somehow not a major topic being discussed about the manufacturing specifically. Yeah.
Okay.
But this happened. Yeah.
Can I just make a brief comment on that?
Absolutely.
So one of the things we've seen over recent years is a lot of organizations outside China have said, well, China electrolyzers are very low cost, but they're not safe, you know, so you shouldn't bring them into Europe. China electrolyzers have made, for many of the manufacturers, have made significant changes over the last few years. And there are a number of China electrolyzers that are meeting the expectations of safety for more and more international companies. When I worked in the corporate world and was in the business of selling hardware, one of the things I learned the hard way is that if you start off with a low-cost solution, it is much easier to build, shall we say, other characteristics into it as customers ask for them, rather than starting off with a very high-cost solution and trying to take things out to get your cost down. And I think this is one of the things that many Chinese equipment suppliers have demonstrated over the last 20 years that they're very good at, if they're interested in an export market. So you will hear a lot of noise around safety. And certainly there are some companies that haven't bothered to do anything with safety because they can sell their electrolyzers to people that don't have the same safety standards. But there's a good number of electrolyzer manufacturers that are now meeting the expectations of more and more international customers.
Okay, that's an interesting strategic advantage as well that you mentioned there. And again, I'm going to come to that in a moment, but we will just get this question to you, Richard. Oceania, it's certainly represented at this event, but yeah. Oceania is somewhere that can be overlooked when discussing APAC. Mm-hmm. Is this somewhere that has its unique challenges and opportunities?
Yes, I think it does. I think it's got some unique opportunities because it's not a part of the world where it's probably one of the few parts of the world that I haven't spent time in from a business standpoint, but it is a long way from a lot of other places. So in many regards, as we were touching on yesterday, every market has its own characteristics and its opportunities, and it's important to understand those as you position yourself to do business there. And Oceania certainly has a lot of opportunities in the energy space. If we look at it historically in terms of natural resources of all types, whether it's coal, whether it's iron ore, in the last 20, 30 years, LNG, and then advancing today with renewables to hydrogen, to liquid hydrogen, potentially exporting that liquid hydrogen to other parts of Asia. That is all up there for grabs. Challenges, it absolutely has challenges because it's a long way from a lot of places. And so transporting energy, has been successfully accomplished with LNG. It is, in my opinion, yet to be truly commercially demonstrated in the hydrogen space, whether as gaseous hydrogen, liquid hydrogen, ammonia and methanol. And from my standpoint, ammonia and methanol are closer to that. There's metal hydrides that are coming to play. There's liquid organic hydrogen carriers that are also being considered. So yeah, there's certainly opportunities that, to overcome some of those challenges in Oceania.
And it's one of those challenges that we do overlook it because it's out of sight to a degree.
I think Oceania is perhaps punching in recent years, is punching a little harder in geopolitics. And I think that's a good thing because it brings them more into the center of attention, and I think that will be a benefit.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions before we close that? I'll try and keep an eye, but perhaps we'll move on to something we've touched upon a couple of times, which is that sense of competitive advantage in the region. I'll open this up, but I did want to come to you chiefly, Richard. What operational technologies, whether that's AI forecasting or, I don't know, liquefaction technologies, telemetry, automation, or otherwise, what operational technologies will create the biggest competitive advantage in this region in the next decade?
So for me, from a I think one of the things we've touched on a little bit in the last couple of days, and especially in the semiconductor space, Andy highlighted it. When you start to look at things like artificial intelligence has been around for quite a while. Companies have been implementing AI into manufacturing activities for probably 15 years. One of the things I see in this part of the world is an openness and a willingness to really embrace new technology and new approaches of all types. I referenced it in my comments yesterday where, in the 1990s, if you looked at technologies in the industrial gases space, that technologies in this region were a long way behind the Western European and the US technologies. Now they are absolutely on a par. And in some cases, more advanced. The Western companies aren't buying technologies from this part of the world out of an act of charity or duty. They're doing it because it makes business sense, because they're quite often cheaper and quite often better, and sometimes both. And I would expect that competition to continue. And I think this part of the world has, as Yuki and Vineet have touched on already, it has some natural advantages which are going to present it with that opportunity to continue the momentum in terms of population sizes, the size of market, and I think a culture of just wanting to get better. It might be an unpopular thing to say, but I'm okay with being unpopular from time to time, is there are many parts of the world where that desire to improve and get better is actually diminishing, and too many, from my standpoint, governments and countries which are saying, oh, we want to go back to the good old days. Well, that isn't a way to drive your economies in today's world when you have countries like China and countries like India who have this insatiable desire to improve. And I think that is going to be a continued story for the next decade.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. That's a great opportunity for me to come to you here, Vineet. A constant desire for improvement at Inox and in India.
Yeah, true. I mean, that goes without saying. I would also like to add here that considering the geographical territory of the entire region, technological improvements in energy transfer or logistics also has a lot of scope where we can do a bit. And I mean, when it comes to Inox and India, yes, I mean, we are always there where the new markets emerge. We are always ready with a product which comes with the best of quality and at the lowest possible price. Yeah, I mean, that's it.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm conscious of the clock in front of us there. We're nicely on time, and if we can keep to that, that would be great. So how about we move to some of our concluding thoughts now on the growth of these markets and what comes next and what it means for the rest of the world. Let's come to you for a moment, Richard. What does this mean for the rest of the world? What impact? It's similar to yesterday when we asked that question.
I think that what it means for the rest of the world is if you're a company that is working across multiple world regions, is you need to be constantly thinking about how is my portfolio impacted by the developments in the different parts of the world. If you're a company that's more focused in this region, then I think you have an opportunity to focus on some very exciting opportunities. You know, one of the things I used to say in business, and I shared this with Andy at the coffee break, is that especially when you're in some of these high growth sectors like semiconductors, it's rather like surfing. Right, you can be out in the ocean with your surfboard, and you can look at a wave going past and say, "Well, no, that's not a very good wave. I'll wait for the next one." But sooner or later, you've got to jump on the wave. You've got to jump on your board and stand up. But you've always got to be thinking about what's going to happen when the wave crashes onto the beach. Are you going to be able to, you know, hop off the board and remain standing and then go back out and catch the next wave? Or are you going to be lying there in a crumpled heap with a broken leg and have to get carted off to hospital and never have the opportunity to catch another wave? That's the way I think about it from a business standpoint in these things. You know, I may be come across as being very negative sometimes, but you have to catch that wave because that's the business opportunity. But you've also got to think about what happens when the wave has gone away and how am I going to recover and be there for them when the next one comes along. And I think with some of the volatility that we see, that will be my kind of closing thought. If that is a closing thought, that's
great. It's a great analogy as well. Thank you. Vineet, your closing thoughts on the markets and catching the next wave?
Yeah, I mean, as we started, when we started the discussions with demand already there, with high potential, high growth potential market here, and aided with various other factors, being a global manufacturing hub, highest growth rate in electronics, semiconductors, healthcare. This is definitely poised for a big growth, big jump, and it is already shared by Aidan yesterday that we are going for 6.5% CAGR till 2030. So, yeah, it's without any doubt, it's a significant central. I mean, APAC will be the central region for that.
Fantastic, thank you, Aidan. Another shout out. And Yuki, we'll close with you. I mean, China's very much riding a wave of hydrogen growth and build out, or has been. What comes next?
You mean China or for the region?
Both. Give us your thoughts on both.
I think for China, and actually also for the region, is that if you're looking from an industrial decarbonization perspective, the energy market nowadays, given this geopolitical changes and also decarbonization pathway, managing energy is becoming more and more complex. So even for the downstream, where do you get your electricity in Thailand or in Singapore, Malaysia? And also because of the region hasn't really make up a clear path for the downstream, for the industry to know, okay, I know for a fact we're going to use hydrogen, or I know for a fact we're going to build this ASEAN grid that we have green electricity, then I don't have to worry about that. So how do you make the strategy in terms of developing your business based on one specific energy consumption assuming this is going to be the direction? And given this region is very dynamic and very different from each country's energy options and energy supply is very different from the downstream, I think it's ultra important to have the strategy and to analyzing where the decarbonization pathway specifically important for the local market. I think that would be the key to add. And in terms of like where China is heading to, it is very clear that China will continue build on its renewable capacity, and it will continue in terms of the digitalization and the data center, as everybody's talking about. This will be the key direction for driving the growth. And that means it's not only having renewable, but how to manage renewable more precisely, more accurately, and how does it, the digitalization will help the industry to utilize renewable wisely. So that would be the key direction, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Some great sentiments, analogies, and calls to action there. And on that note, that does bring this panel to its conclusion. You've been listening to Vineet Koshal of INOXCVA, Yuki Yu of Energy Iceberg, and Richard Boocock of Boocock Advisory. Let's give them all a round of applause.